we are back, and as promised, we now are joined by guest Donnie Welch. Donnie teaches creative writing at the Rebecca School in New York City. He's been working in neurodiverse education for over 4 years, is a published poet and children's author, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his work in this poetry workshop model he's doing, and in the sensory motor poetry. It's the sensory motor poetry workshop. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
It's a thrill. We love to have fabulous educators on the show. We can never get enough of that. So thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about what sensory motor poetry is.
Sure. So in a nutshell, sensory motor poetry is a poetry model that involves movement, right? I like to describe it as a workshop that's grounded in social emotional learning, based on the idea that movement learning and literacy learning go hand in hand. Right, that movement helps us understand rhythm, rhythm helps us understand poetry, and that poetry helps us understand each other.
Love it. But for people who've never seen this in practice, what's that look like?
Sure. So there are two kind of modalities of it. One involves a lot of messy tabletop tactile sensory play, and so in that we'll break down the imagery of a poem per se. So in a poem like Shel Silverstein's Alligator's Toothache, I might have a whole model alligator made out of Play-Doh, like a model alligator head, and then I'll have students put the teeth up all back together as a group. So it's a collaborative effort. You got everyone working together towards a common goal. And then as the groups develop and mature together and grow together, we get a little more active, we get a little more movement based. And what that looks like is a group of students supporting one another in a circle while one student reads. And so there's this interchange of reader and beat keeper, and it's something you might see as part of a hip-hop cipher or a bluegrass round or something reminiscent of jazz or big band where each player takes a turn playing a solo. It's this kind of empathic back and forth of reader and supporter that plays into that social emotional work and gets students working on reading and excited about reading and writing.
And you're doing these kinds of things with kids of all different kinds of abilities, is that correct?
Correct.
And what are you finding?
That it's a lot of fun.
And they're learning, right? Isn't that the big takeaway, is that when you make that kind of a rich environment experience, they're learning on all different kinds of levels?
Absolutely. I like to describe it as social emotional literacy learning. There's one little story in particular I love to tell where we were working on this poem about Transformers in one of my groups, one of the more movement-oriented groups. And in it, this student realized that we had used the pronoun he a bunch of times. And we were writing, I believe the lines were, Ironhide busted his leg during a fight with Starscream. He couldn't get it back, so he got a peg leg. And this student was like, wait, we've said he too many times. Who are we talking about? And when this other student heard this little question, they stepped up and they said, well, there's only one character who has a busted leg, so we must be talking about Ironhide here. And it was this amazing peer critique moment where these two students were able to give each other this little literary feedback based on one another's creative work and based on their genuine interest in each other's creative work.
And how old were those students?
So that was like a middle school age group. So I believe 13.
But these are the kinds of conversations that we all long for, right?
Right.
To be able to have our kids reading something and delving that deep into it.
And why is
Amazing.
poetry, of all the enriching artistic activities, why is poetry so important, especially for the population, the autism population?
I think poetry in particular is a genre that's so interested in voice. It's something that you talk about in fine arts settings, it's something you talk about in community settings, and this idea of voice is central. And it's central to what I'm doing with the workshops as well. I like to say that the workshops are a tool to practice self-expression and in turn self-advocacy. And there's this wonderful quote actually from Dead Poets Society. It's right after the scene where Robin Williams has his kids tear the introduction out of the textbook. And it's, we don't read and write poetry because it's cute. we read and write poetry because we're members of the human race. And I think there's this innate desire to communicate an inner life, regardless of your neural makeup or regardless of your ability level. And I see poetry in particular as my personal passion, as a vehicle to help these students express their inner life.
So talk to us a little bit about how this workshop got started and where you hope it's going to go.
So it started in the library during summer school, actually. I was approached by one of the education directors at Rebecca School, and she asked me if I'd be interested in starting an affinity group. And I said yes, because, as a poet, the idea of running a workshop in New York City is the dream come true. But I didn't really know what I was going to do, so I went in the first day with a Shel Silverstein poem and a ball of model magic, which is just I don't know if it's off-brand Play-Doh, but it's a kind of Play-Doh, and went at it. And from there, it slowly over time grew. It started with 5 students. As I got more comfortable and as my lesson plans kind of grew in complexity and began to have a focus, those 5 students slowly turned into 5 groups, and those 5 groups slowly turned into seeing a majority of the school. And I'm hoping to keep spreading it. Next year, I'll be moving into a more part-time liaison role, Rebecca, with the hopes of reaching out to other institutions, other schools, and bringing it into community settings as well.
And you recently self-published a sensory reading starter kit that has 25 workshop plans. Tell us just a little bit about that. Shannon's got it right here.
It's great.
Yeah, thank you. So that first year after the just rolling in with model magic incident, I took some time to really think about what I wanted to do. And so I wanted to keep it tabletop for that first year, and I started getting a little more imaginative. The alligator's toothache lesson I told you about at the start was really one of my first. And so the sensory reading starter kit is a collection of my lesson plans from that first year. And so it's 25 lessons that all involve fun, messy, tactile, hands-on play that relate to different poems. And some of the poems in there are from really canonical names like Langston Hughes or Emily Dickinson. Some of them are from more contemporary authors like Richard Brautigan or Dorothea Lasky. But all of them and all the lessons involve taking these abstract ideas like imagery, like theme, like motif, and making them something hands-on that parents and teachers and students can all have fun with together.
And how can they get this starter kit?
So if you visit my site, it's www.donniewelchpoetry.com, and then you go over to the shop section, it'll be right there.
Okay.
Really remarkable. It's, the thing is they're very well written lessons. It gives you everything that you need in one column, the materials and the prep, and a parent who's never taught before could do this.
That's a good endorsement from you.
Yes, it is. But a teacher can take this and run far with it, right? But a parent, I know many of you are homeschooling, and what's great is that, as I see this, you can be hitting literature standards and art standards while you're doing sensory play with your kid that your OT would be thrilled with. Have I got that right, Donnie?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wrote it with the intention of parents and caregivers in mind. You don't need to have an MFA or a BFA or any kind of A to really just do it. You just have to be willing to have fun with language.
Okay, great.
It's really remarkable. So again, your website, let's put that back up there one more time, DonnieWelchPoetry.com. We think you're a remarkable young educator.
Thank you.
And so if people would like for the workshop to come to their school, do they just get the starter kit or can they actually have you come to the school?
Both. Yeah, I'd love to have my starter kit end up in new places, but I'd love to come to new places too. On my website, there's a contact page, and it just goes right to my email, and I'd love to get the conversation started. And next year, I'm looking for a lot of new places to collaborate with. So, yeah.
And do you ever just go and educate educators on how to do this?
Yeah, recently I've done a lot of conference work. I've been fortunate enough to travel kind of around the East Coast and a little bit into the Midwest doing different conferences. And I'd love to start getting into schools and really working with educators to get excited about writing some poetry workshop.
Fabulous.
Great.